I want to get into the next segment because my next guest is fantastic and has been talking about this in particular for a very, very long time and was thrown out to the wolves because of her talking about this. And then later completely vindicated because, well, reality's happening, folks. You can ignore it for so much time, but eventually it comes and it bites you right in the tuchus. So, welcome to the stage, Lauren Southern. Thank you so
Thank
much for
you for
joining me
having me.
today. It's always a pleasure having you, and I love your set. By the way, your set's awesome. It brings me right back to my childhood.
I asked for retro Cascadian cabin core, and I think they gave it to me. It
They
was
nailed
good.
it.
Yeah.
They nailed it. Absolutely. But yeah, so you've drawn a lot of attention lately. You've come back. You're doing your usual thing. You said forget it. You're not living up to your end of the bargain. I'm gonna live up to mine, and I'm gonna talk about this stuff. And one of the things that really triggered a lot of people recently was a tweet that you put out, and I absolutely love it because, well, it shows a lot of what's happening here in Canada. And this tweet, of course, is the "I love Indian food" holding a ice cap from Tim Hortons. And I mean, you set the mood. You set the mood with that one, and it really let people know where you were going with this. Tell us, where were you going with this?
I mean, it's crazy to me. There was a whole documentary on Netflix. They did a whole investigation into the fact that brands like Hollister only hired hot people, right? Yet, when you have a company here in Canada that literally only hire one minority group who also happen to be really nervous about being deported and really willing to work for low wages, you're not allowed to point that out. Why? Well, you're a racist, but also that racist label conveniently works out for mega corporations who are pretty keen on the idea of importing legal slavery, in my opinion. So I think it's a joke, and it's a joke that works because it's true and everyone sees it around them. So it's funny to point it out, but there's also a much more sinister level to it of I'm trying to point to a very obvious problem in our society of the importation of a slave labor class that is destroying opportunities and you know wage bargaining for the working class in this country. And it's mostly being completely ignored by our politicians and by our media because of this label racist that people are so afraid of.
Well, it's eerily reminiscent to what's happened to other groups of people throughout history. And I'm not talking about slavery, but I'm talking about indentured servitude that's happened
Mhm.
here in Canada, it's happened in the United States, it's happened in other western countries. And here in Canada, on the west coast, we had Chinese and Japanese people come over as indentured servants to work on the railroad, treated tremendously terribly. And now we try to teach that in schools and tell people don't do that. We saw what happened after the potato famines and Irish people coming over and being indentured into servitude and being like literally worked to the bone, worked to death in labor situations where they had no other choice. It's that or get swimming. We're not even going to provide you a boat to go home if you want to get out of this. And now it's happening again, but now it's taboo. We're not allowed to talk about it because somebody's benefiting from this whole thing.
Totally. And people can say, "Oh, well, they're being paid a wage, right? So this isn't slavery." Is it a living wage? No. What are we seeing in Toronto? What are we seeing in Vancouver? We're seeing the rent prices skyrocket because we simply do not have enough housing for the people in these cities. And if you go to Our Canada Housing Too, which is a fantastic subreddit, there are plenty of Kijiji ads, Craigslist ads they post every day showing absolute squalor rentals up for $1,000 that these people working at Tim Hortons can barely afford. Some of them are living 15, 16, 17 people to a house, sharing a basement. And what that does as well is people can be like, "Oh, well, whatever." What I see all liberals say is, who's going to clean the toilets? Who's going to make your coffee? If it's not for these immigrants, you should be happy. Well, okay, even if I'm being very racist, first of all, but even if I'm being
Well, yeah,
entirely
it reminds me of the Kelly Osbourne. Didn't she say that?
yes,
She famously said, like, Donald Trump, who's going to clean your toilets if it's not for the Hispanics? Like, oh, no. Did you really say that? Like, you didn't mean that, did you?
cleaning
Oh,
their cars,
goodness.
yeah,
Like, that
cleaning the
is a
cars.
horrible train of thought.
Yes, it is, but that's, that's what's going on up there. A little sociopathic, guys. But if you even think of it just from a purely selfish perspective, as someone who was born in Canada, like we don't have the infrastructure for this. And because we don't have the infrastructure for this, it's getting overwhelmed. Your streets are getting more crowded. Your housing prices are going up. Your ability to bargain for wages is going down because, oh, you'll only do this really crappy job for $30 an hour. Well, I can import someone from overseas who's usually getting paid $1 an hour and will happily do it for 10, 15, whatever it is, right? And it's the end goal of this is to essentially lower the standard of living for the entire working class and non-property owning class in Canada. You all just need to accept and be okay with barely being able to afford rent, even though 10 years ago, this wasn't normal. You need to be okay with nearly crying every time you go to the grocery store, because look at all these people we've imported who are shifting our culture to be okay with this because they are used to a lower standard. It's great to have immigration of people who want to be a part of this country, who love this country, but it has to be at a sustainable rate, a rate at which they can integrate, and a rate at which they aren't going to destroy our culture and our standards that we have for business practice, for lifestyle, at the behest of the political and corporate class.
Well, I'm sure a ton of these people, they would be happy to integrate if they were in neighborhoods where they had the ability to immigrate or integrate, because but that's not what's happening. They're, a lot of people are being shoved into areas where they're only around people that speak their native language. They're only working in places where it's people that speak their native language. They're not like, okay, so for example, when I moved to Japan, I lived in Japan for a while because my wife's Japanese. The whole purpose of going there was to learn her culture and language. So the first thing I did was I looked for a job that didn't have any other English speaking people. I wanted to get a job where I could,
helpful.
and it was hard to, yeah, it's hard to do, but I only spoke Japanese when I was there, and it made it really difficult, but I caught on really quick. I was able to learn a lot about the culture. I was able to learn about the language, and that was a thing. But a lot of these people are coming over, and they're just being shoved into positions where there is no cultural integration. It's just basically a remote, satellite of the place that they're from. It's incredible to see.
Yeah, I'd say there's half of them that have come here and are disappointed by that. I mean, I was doing interviews in Surrey. I haven't published them, but speaking to young women who are like, geez, like I tried to escape this culture. That's why I left my home country, and now it's all been imported here. I can't believe it. And then there's another half who are genuinely here this is an economic zone for them. They want to exploit it and get everything they can out of this country. And you can tell because they don't bother to learn the language. They deliberately move to these neighborhoods where no one is Canadian. They have come here to take as much as they can. And, that's only human. I'm not even saying this as a denigrating statement. I'm saying,
Right.
Americans and Canadians do this all the time. They move to, countries where they can get cheaper housing, where they can kind of live this lavish lifestyle, getting massages and, fruit plates every day. They're not there to really, encourage the culture that they have in that place. They're there to exploit it. And there are a lot of people coming to Canada that see it as this weak country that has given up on its identity, that has given up on any sort of standards for borders, for, socialized systems, and they're taking advantage of it like anyone would, Western or non-Western. And it's our politicians' fault.
Well, we have a prime minister. Yeah, we have a prime minister that says this is the end of it's the post nation state, the first one. Yeah, and you struck a chord with me about like people that are leaving for higher ground, because I'm talking about moving to Texas myself.
Oh
now,
goodness.
like
I've been having
this
these
is
conversations too.
but this is what happens, right? So because of mass immigration, it can lead to mass emigration. It can lead to an exodus of the people that are local to that place. And I'm not saying like any particular race of people. I'm talking just people from that place. You know, Canadians proper, like people who have lived here for, several generations, which happen to be all kinds of creeds and colors of people. But they're looking at the situation and they're going, for economic reasons and for, obviously, the housing crisis is led largely by this immigration crisis, and that's leading to more economic woes along with bad management of our. It's this brain drain that's going to happen to
Yeah.
Canada, where we're bringing in unskilled laborers, and then we're filtering out, we're disincentivizing anybody who has skills from even staying here in the first place. Is that like, could that lead to the death of a nation? Like what's and I'd hate to think that I'm contributing to that, right?
You know, it's like being in an abusive relationship. The people who are built this country are being the worst treated here. They truly are. If you are building this country, if you are truly working, doing a job like farming, working in infrastructure, building, you are getting taxed at the highest rates. I have my Instagram. If you're Canadian and living in Vancouver, you probably get this too. I have little Instagram reel ads that are sponsored by the Canadian government pop up, and it's like free $10,000 welcome packages to new arrivals. And I just want to throw my phone across the room. I'm like, I know half a dozen people here in my neighborhood that can barely afford rent or food, that have children that would love 10 grand, and they're actually the ones paying taxes to go to these packages. It's just absolutely nuts. And I love this country. I just came here from being out with some friends, swimming in the ocean. Like, it is the most beautiful country on earth. I will not feel at home anywhere else. It kind of makes me understand the South Africans I spoke to who refused to flee their country despite the farm murders. They're like, this is my home. This feels like home to me. But I also think that anyone who is thinking practically, thinking economically, thinking about their freedoms and safety and the future of their family is seriously considering moving to America right now. It's simple as that. Every single person I know who is a very successful, industrious individual is looking at plans to escape this country. And of course, that will kill a country. If you don't have the industrious hard workers, and you just have the people that, like you said, are this unskilled labor who don't even remember what this country is because they weren't born here. They don't know what made Canada Canada. How can they sustain it?
Well, and there's no requirement for them to know what Canada's all about. I know, some countries require, if you want to come, you got to learn about the place at least along the way. And there seems to be no requirements of any of that here in Canada. But where do we go from here? So we have this student crisis. We have all of these students that have come to Prince Edward Island in particular, which was the subject of your video, a large portion of the subject of your video, which the link is in the description down below. Please go watch it. The reason why I had you and Harrison on is because it was such a fantastic video, and it did really give a good portrayal of both sides of it, like who these immigrants are, how they're being mistreated, as well as how it's detrimental to Canada in the first place. But so these people are going to Prince Edward Island because apparently or evidently the requirements are a little bit more lax there for immigrants, so they end up there. And now a bunch of them their visas are about to expire, but they've been promised by third parties, not even our government, that they'll be able to stay. And now they have grievances, and they're taking it out to the streets to say we got duped, so therefore you guys need to deal with us. Where do you go from there? How do you realistically deal with these people in both a humanitarian sort of way, but also in a realistic you can't stay way?
I mean, I know it's so absurd. The whole, I feel bad, but at the same time, it's not Canadians' problem. I'm sorry. We are caught at the intersection of an Indian on Indian violence scam campaign going on here. There are these Harrison, I'm sure, explained it, and he explains it in the video we did. These contractors going around India telling people, you give us $10,000 and we'll get you a pathway to citizenship in Canada. And once again, what a tragic thing. Like PEI, very small community, very small group of people. All of this is so in opposition to nature and how communities and families and these structures work. Very important when you have tight-knit groups of people to maintain that. And then they flood all these people who don't care at all about PEI. They're just there purely because some numbers on a screen, some government document told them they might be able to game the system better, have absolutely no intention of making it a better place, but they feel that they deserve and are entitled to citizenship through this way because of someone who once again wasn't even Canadian, promised them that if you give me 10 grand, you can have it. It's not our problem. It's not our problem. And quite frankly, there was that great video of Bernier the other day interviewing some of these protesters. And he just said, you have to go home. You have to go home. I'm sorry. Like, I know it sucks, but there are a lot of people in Canada right now that are in really shitty, excuse my language, situations. Their lives suck right now too because of the perpetuation of these scams. They can't feed their family. They're getting addicted to drugs because their lives have fallen apart. They are financially just destitute. Their children can't find summer jobs and get their lives together. They're sitting at home vaping and playing video games all day and have no motivation because they don't think they'll ever own a home or be able to get married or have a life, or they'll even be at Canada in the future. Like, for all of there's this pathological altruism where it's like, oh, well, this one person might be really upset if we don't give him a pass and let him stay in the country because some scam artist told him he could. Well, what about all, like, let's do some, second order thinking here. What about all of the consequences of this perpetual pathological altruism? All of the lives destroyed, the families destroyed, the futures destroyed, the nation destroyed. I'm sorry, but they have to go home.
Yeah, you can't just sit on this and hope that the problem will go away while you're obviously bringing more and more people in. So at the same time as these people are sitting in limbo, wanting to change their status or extend their status when there's been a clear decision made on where they're at, they're simultaneously bringing in another 300,000 students this year from again the same regions. And like where do we finally go, hey, let's put the brakes on this?
I think this upcoming election, it's going to become a massive, massive issue. I did a video, I think you shared it as well. It's just saying my hometown has been destroyed. And we went into one of these visa centers, which, by the way, if you go to a little town in Toronto or like, kind of the Indian areas of Surrey and Vancouver, these immigration offices, which are janky places, like really, they're in the back alley, some rando running them, every corner, 2-minute walk from each other. You look at them, there's more of these immigration places than there are Starbucks and McDonald's on any street. And you walk into them and they tell you, yeah, we can get you into the country no matter what. But interestingly enough, this guy we spoke to in one of them told us that they are all feeling this ominous thing in the back of their head that it's coming to an end. This election, it has gotten so bad. It is so overwhelming. Even I follow like local pages like Vancouver Wilding. It's not a political page. It's not a right-wing page, nothing like that. And they're posting videos that people are taking on TikTok of Canada Day in Vancouver Harbor where everyone's Indian and people are shocked by it. This is something I used to do 5-10 years ago where I'd take videos in like the streets of Paris and be like, wow, guys, like this is some pretty quick demographic change. Not even about the demographics, but just like, this is an insane amount of immigration. Are you guys sure you can handle this? And people called me a racist. They couldn't believe I did this. And now you've got normal non-political pages sharing this stuff because it has so overwhelmed people's hometowns. It's impossible to ignore. So I do think it is going to become a major issue this upcoming election. I think the Conservatives are going to take this election, but I also don't know if they're going to be able to turn it around. Who's even making these policies? Under Harper, there was pretty strong immigration as well. Obviously nothing compared to Trudeau, but did anyone vote for this? I don't think a single liberal I know in real life actually said, I think this is a great thing and I want this. This is like a shadow, behind the scenes boards and people that are not making decisions in the public eye. Trudeau takes a lot of the flack, but I think he's just kind of an actor. He's the drama teacher that they put up there to smile and sell out his country, which is obviously terrible. But there's a bunch of nameless, faceless individuals making these decisions to bring in these numbers. Most of them probably bought out by big corporations like Tim Hortons, like corporations in this country that need cheap labor, and also by people who have lots of investment in keeping that housing bubble going. Because if the housing bubble collapses in Canada, the amount of money our politicians and corporate class will lose that have massive property investments, not good. And they are going to keep pumping up those numbers to keep that housing bubble going and that cheap labor going, no matter what. I don't even think the Liberals that voted for Trudeau had any idea that this is what they were voting for. This was not elected. This was not voted on.
So what you're describing kind of reminds me of a Douglas Adams Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. The villains in that story are an interesting. I'm going to sound like a total dork by saying this, but the villains in the story, they weren't actually bad guys per se. They were just they evolved to be bureaucrats, which is hilarious because on their home planet there was like an animal that would smack you in the nose if you ever had a free thought. So they never had any free thought through their whole evolution. Yes. So they became a bureaucratic race, and then they became the villains, and they were plowing Earth because it happened to be in the way of an intergalactic
all this
freeway or whatever it was. It all checks out. So it's this monster of bureaucracy and people all serving themselves self-interestedly along the way a little bit, right? Oh, I'm just going to skim off the top here. I'm going to give this contract to my friend. I'm going to award this contract to my buddy. And then when you see that as the government gets bigger and bigger and bigger, it becomes this giant monster, and then it moves on its own. It's like you're describing the pretty boy with the flashy show. He's not even running the gig, and nobody's running the gig. It's just it's the blob, and it's moving forward and it's doing its thing.
Totally. And I think there's also a general mindset in Canadians. I mean, I started to feel it when I was younger too. That decline of empire mindset. It's like, ooh, we're not really on the upswing. Like, I feel like we're kind of being cannibalized. I feel like people are just kind of getting their last thing they can from what Canada is, ripping out their last scam. Whether, look at the, do we even know where the money went for the ArriveCan app? That's like,
we're still working on it.
That's like bank robbery tier. Like, we're going to plan a heist, but they don't care because it's a declining empire. Who's going to look into it? There's so much scamming going on. There's so much money being stolen in the back end by these politicians. So many BS organizations being started for the sole purpose of lining their pocketbooks, right? That I think these people in these positions just look at it and go, well, everyone else is doing it. This country is dead. I might as well get a bite out of the carcass too. It's not even like a malicious. Sad. It's just self-interested. And also we're a nation that is not particularly religious, right? We're individualist. Mm-hmm. We are, even liberalism itself, while I love freedom and these kind of things, it's not a moral system. It's not a system that tells you what is like right and wrong spiritually to do to other people. And a lot of it is individualist. Well, everyone else is doing it. That's how you play the game. I got to play the game. That's how I was raised in this country to be.
It feels like the collapse of the Soviet Union, actually, how you describe it there. That's really sad. But on an upswing,
you're living in it, right? You don't see it when you're living in it. Look at COVID. Like, looking back on that, that's insane. I'm sure if we're saying in 20 years or 50 years, there'll be textbooks about the things our government did to us, but you can't see it when you're living in it until it's like you're literally at the firing wall.
Well, let's hope they don't win, because they'll write the history books and they won't write that in. So hopefully we bring liberty back, and that's what I'm all about. I'm all about showing Canada as the example of what not to do, and hopefully we can move forward and bring liberty. And bring a place, you know, there's no welfare state, there's no thing for people, no incentive for people to come in and pick away at it. You know, come work hard, earn stuff. Like I said, immigration's a great thing. If you have people with skills that are coming over because they want to build things, great, come on over, join us, help us build. That's the way to go.
And I will add a positive point to this is, you know, even though I do think the Conservatives are going to win this next election, I think people overall are getting less and less faith in their politicians and more looking to themselves. Okay, I can't trust the system to save me. I can't trust the system to save my community. And they're starting to give up on politics a bit. And I don't think that's entirely a bad thing, because I think that's when you start to rebuild what the actual foundation of a country is, which is families, which is friendships and communities. You look to each other instead. We can't trust the government. All they do is steal our money and like destroy this country. We better start getting our personal lives in order, because there's no safety net anymore. And that's when you start to build a real country from the ground up again.
I agree with that. I totally agree with that. And like, okay, before I let you go, I gotta ask you. When it comes to Pierre Poilievre, he's not talking about immigration. He's kind of avoiding it. If he's asked it, he will answer questions about it, but he's always very short and to the point, and then moves on. I tend to think that he's just trying to avoid, you know, being painted as a Donald Trump. If he says we can't have this much immigration, blah blah blah, they're gonna be like, he's calling for a border wall. You know, that's how I think the media is gonna try to portray it, and he's trying to dodge it. What's your 2 cents on that whole situation?
Yeah, I mean, my hopium side, that's just overdose on hopium here, is that it is a political strategy, knowing full well that this is a topic that is radioactive. And it's not just radioactive because of like the liberal leftist position of you're racist if you say this. It's radioactive because there are a lot of big industry people that are donating to elections, swaying elections, own the media, that are highly invested in mass immigration. And it's to a degree that me and you, even despite all the time we spend in politics, could never even understand. And he's probably sitting there with his party thinking about how they're going to approach these issues. Like, if we open that Pandora's box, every single like mega donor, every single, you know, person that's pushing stuff behind the scenes, we're going to have to fight against them. And we're already fighting against the mainstream media. We're already fighting against a party that is in power at the moment. We're not even in power yet. That's my hopium side. The other side is that it's just, you know, same old, same old. You cycle through parties, left, right, left, right, left, right, as the country gets worse. Maybe that's the more likely side. And at least we'll get the Conservatives in and show that the majority of Canadians didn't agree with the decline of our country. But either way, the only thing we can look to is us, our community now. This community you've created here to find sanity and find hope and a path forward. We can't look at Pierre Poilievre and expect that he's going to fix this country, because he's one man that can change a few policies, but it's going to be up to us on the ground here.
Yeah, we'll all die waiting if we're waiting for a savior. So we all have to, you know, pick ourselves up and start doing things. Do something.
Should it be that way? No, but it is. So
it is that way. It is that way. Lauren, where can people find you? You've moved around, so let people know where they can find you, so they can pay attention to more of your media.
Thank you. You can find me at Lauren_Southern on Twitter, Lauren Southern on YouTube, and Lauren Southern at Tenet Media. That's TENET. Yes, Tenet. That's how you spell it. Whoa,
Tenet.
We're getting late now. Time for a nap.
So I have the link in the description down below for the video that I was referring to, and that was published by Tenet Media. Mm-hmm. So everyone go check that out. Lauren Southern's always available on X if you wanna tweet at her. Are we calling it tweeting still? Is it Xing? Are you posting on X? That doesn't go well.
It doesn't sound good. So yeah. It doesn't. Yes.
Yeah, we're still tweeting, Elon. We're still tweeting.
X at me.
Yeah.
I'm gonna leave.
Yeah, we're still tweeting. So yeah. Anyway, reach out to Lauren and say hello and tell her how great a good job she's doing. And thank you so much for joining me on the show. We'll definitely have you again. And well, keep up the great work.
Thanks, Clyde. Appreciate you.